if we only get to encounter them 40 times a year, then we better make it worth it, and the stats,
It's huge.
I haven't seen them recently, but the stat that the only spiritual conversations that students engage in, it's like 80% of students only engage in spiritual conversation at church, right? And so if we only get them 40 times a year, and this is the only time that the vast majority of them talk about God at all, we better not waste a moment. And so it was that urgency piece of going, this matters, like this right here matters. And it was bleeding that into my staff, bleeding that into my difference makers, and then making sure that I kept that idea of you're part of the family up front. And then every week that we would have different challenges based on whatever lesson it was, like, hey, encourage 5 people this week, or like, be nice to your parents, or whatever. Don't kick your dog. I don't know. But like the challenge that we always had was, who can you bring with you to be part of what God's doing here? Because we need everybody to reach that 885,000. Right. And so it was keeping it in front and keeping it in front and keeping it in front that started kind of that missional ball rolling. And then, and I already mentioned Abby, right? But it was a few stories like Abby's that, as those got going, the momentum like just began to build and build and build and build. And so it was I mean, without sounding super cheesy, it's connection, simplification, and magnification.
Well, dude, let's just get into it. Frank, tell me a little bit about yourself, what got you into ministry, and where you're at now.
Yeah, bro. So most interesting thing about me is I am the oldest of 15.
15?
Yeah, bro. I'm the oldest of 15. All of us are adopted.
With like 6 other siblings?
Well, being the oldest of 15, like, a little more on that real quick. My mom is my biological mom, but my dad adopted me, right? I'm the only white kid in my family.
Okay.
So all of us are adopted. My mom and my dad divorced about 10 days before I turned 13. And so I've essentially been doing student ministry since I was 12, right?
Wow.
Maybe a little bit of kids ministry thrown in there because dad was out of the picture. I remember it was the point where I don't know that I accepted Jesus Christ because I had grown up in the church. I don't know if I accepted him at that point, but it was 2 days after Christmas, and I was the oldest of 7 at the time. And mom worked nights, and she had to go to work, and she looked at me and said, hey, if you call me and I have to come home, we could lose the house, we could lose the car, we could lose everything.
Wow.
And so as a 12-year-old, I remember her saying, okay, come to the door, lock it. And I remember turning around with my back to the door and saying to God, I don't know if you're real, but if you're real, I need you to be here tonight. And so it was one of those where that's kind of where my ministry journey, my relationship with Jesus started, because I had been raised in the church. But it was that moment where at 12, it was like, all right, God, this is it. Rubber meets the road. Are you there? All right, let's go. So been doing kids ministry, student ministry for a real long time. Kind of was the father figure for my siblings. My mom continued to adopt kids. Ended up with 15 of us. That's been a crazy journey. Then I was going into my freshman year of high school at CIY. We didn't call it Move at the time. It was just CIY. And we were in Gunnison, Colorado.
Where are you living at in this time?
At that time, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so attending Memorial Park Christian Church, which doesn't exist anymore, but shout out Memorial Park. And so Brewster McLeod, a guy named Brewster McLeod was speaking. A guy named Jeff Moody was leading worship. And I just remember the Holy Spirit being like, nah, vocational ministry is where it's at for you. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll go play basketball and hang out with students and it'll be awesome. And it was one of those where since that point, I've tried to walk away from ministry multiple times. I've tried to say, hey, I'll do consulting and leadership coaching with ministers, right? And God's like, no, I think you need to be in the church. And so it's one of those where it's been ups and downs and all those things. Been vocationally on and off, but primarily vocationally in ministry since 99. So I've been here a long time. Like I say, there's been times where I've tried to run from it. There's been church hurt and burnout and all the things. And I've done student ministry in a church of 150 where we started with 7 kids. I'm currently doing student ministry in a church. I think we just recorded just under 8,000 people last week.
Amazing.
And a student ministry of about 700 kids total through the ministry in a month. And ministry of in suburban, like upper middle class suburbia and lower income multicultural. It's been a journey, bro. It's been a journey.
It's amazing. I really wanted to get a conversation with you and really record it because I think like, and I knew just a little bit of your story just from kind of doing some research about you and your church and stuff. Just to ask you some questions.
Did you learn some new stuff? I mean, was it good stuff? Did you learn good stuff about me? Because I don't know.
Well, that's like I said, why I wanted to sit down with you and just get some wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think you can't be in ministry that long, 25 years.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a great title for this episode is, leadership lessons of 25 years in youth ministry.
Yeah.
But maybe just kind of walk me through a little bit of that journey of when you said yes to answering that call to what got you to where you are today, and how what's kept you going.
Well, I would say relational ministry is thrown around, right? Like everybody's relational, right? If you're in ministry, you're like, oh, I'm relational. Even if you're an introvert and you don't talk to anybody, like I'm relational. That's a strength of mine. But honestly, that is a strength of mine. I think the situation when I was 12, right? That situation, there was nobody, not my student pastor, not my lead guy, no elders in the church that really came alongside me and walked with me. And it was one of those things where on the Enneagram, you're probably familiar with that, but I'm a 3, right? And I have to succeed. I have to win, and I have to look good doing it. But the thing about it is, there's a little bit of I'm going to make sure I'm here, right? Yep. And so because growing up, it was you got to take care of your siblings. You got to make sure the household is taken care of, and I was kind of marginalized, and so it was one of those where when I felt the call to ministry, it was I want to make sure that no teenager ever feels marginalized. I want to make sure that every student that I encounter comes face to face with somebody that makes them feel like they matter, right? Like the 3 kind of like shadow pillars of every ministry I've done, right, is so simple that it's connect with us, connect with God, and connect with mission.
Hey, real quick, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and watching this podcast, wherever it is on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching this. And I just want to ask a big personal ask of you. And that is one, if you are watching this and you're not subscribed, to please hit the subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on upcoming content coming your way, resources, videos, trainings, all those things. It does our show a huge service if you like the episode, if you subscribe, and please, if this is helpful for you, share it with a friend, someone in ministry, another youth leader, another youth pastor. That's how we grow this in order to impact and encourage more leaders in ministry. Thank you.
Right. It's that idea of you need to know if you're a student and you're a teenager, even if you're in a stable home, right? You have all the questions, you have the biological stuff going on. You have all of this stuff going on, like questions of who I am and what I'm going to do and all these things. And you need to know that somebody proactively cares about you. Right. And no matter no matter what background you're coming from, you need to know that somebody cares about you. And that opens the door for me to be able to point you to Jesus. Right. You need to know that I care about you, but no matter how like genuine my care for you, my love for you is, it's going to be flawed in my own weaknesses. And so I need to point you to the person who will help you be who you were created to be. Right. And then it's that whole idea of discipleship, right? People are like, well, let's focus on discipleship. No, let's focus on evangelism. Well, evangelism is part of discipleship, right? So discipleship, getting to know God and all of that. But then if you're not connecting students to mission, if you're not helping people understand that it's not enough just to get spiritually fat, right? It's not enough for us just to take in all this like spiritual wisdom and all these moments with God. God gives you those. He fills your cup so that you can fill the cup of other people, right? And so it's connect with mission. And that's been my driver no matter where I've been, no matter what church I've been at, has been making sure that every student that comes through our doors knows that they're cared about, right? With no pretext, right? Like it's not, I'm caring about you so that we can grow our numbers. It's not that I'm caring about you so that like I can get a foothold in the school to do whatever, to start a club or whatever it is. It's that Jesus cared about me when I needed somebody to care about me. And so I care about you in those moments, right? And I mean, we can jump back to the beginning a little bit if you want, but like in our current context, right? It's one of those where I show up out here in June of 22, and we're running about 40 kids,
Wow.
right?
And
And
how big is the church at the time? Like a weekend attendance kind of thing?
just about, it was probably about 1,500 at that point.
Sure.
Trevor and I, Trevor had started part-time in January of 22, which I saw him at the end of January. I was in the middle of figuring out what my next adventure was. I saw him in the Dominican at the end of January. And, shout out to my boss, Trevor DeVage. Like me and that guy have go back about 20 years and talked about working together. So when I'm looking for a new adventure, he takes on Pantano. He's like, dude, come out and do student ministry. And I'm like, no. You know what? God wants us to stay in Dallas. This is where God wants us to be. And so then God's like, cool. And shuts one door and shuts another door and shuts another door and shuts another door. And then finally, like all of like I had some coaching contracts and stuff that I had let lapse because I'm like, no, we're going to end up in a church. It's going to be awesome. And God's going to open that door. And so our money streams were just closing up. And I'm like, God, I legit don't know what I'm going to do. And it was the end of April 22, and I go and I see a therapist. Coming from the background I come from, I need somebody to listen to me on a regular basis, right? And so props to therapy. Don't be afraid to get help. So I went to see my therapist, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he's like, dude, you're connected across the country. Just ask for help. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. You know what? People will offer me jobs selling insurance, and I don't want to sell insurance. And so he's like, okay, cool. Then I guess your family won't have any money. And I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yeah,
that's
a
nice
good
of you.
point. Maybe I should pray about that.
So 2:15 Central Time, I put a post on Facebook that just said, hey, I'm looking for a job. Doesn't have to be a ministry. I don't care where it is. 2:45. My guy Trevor DeVay shoots me a text, and I have it saved on my phone. It just says Tucson ? And I was out here 6 weeks later. And so we both started full-time Father's Day of 22. And so it's one of those where God's just kind of had his hand in that. What I was going to say is coming out here, Tucson is the 12th largest unchurched city in the nation, right? It means in
I don't
Pima
want to go
County.
there. It's too hot.
Well, dude,
It's too hot. I'm gonna bake. Be like a fried egg out in Tucson.
Ryan, it's a dry heat, bro. It's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
No, let's be clear. 110 is still 110. All right. Like,
I mean, I will say, my wife is a Phoenix kid. Shout out to CCV. I've had Jake Hancock on here and CCV people, but yeah, it is different. It's not bad. It's just really hot still, and there's no grass, and there's trees, and it's kind of sad sometimes. But we love Arizona. I got a special spot in my heart.
Any bush you get close to probably has claws and wants to cut you up. So
every plant that's here is trying to kill me.
Dude, we were out here interviewing, and we were like, "Oh, cactus, that's awesome!" And so my son stuck his hand out, and he ended up with cactus like spines in his arm. I'm like, "Oh, okay, so this is a dangerous place." But we came out here, and in Pima County, there's about 1 million people, right? Of that 1 million people, 850,000 of them have no church exposure, right? Wow. And it's not that on the West Coast, specifically in Arizona, it's not that people here in Arizona are anti-Christian or against the gospel or anything like that. It's that they legitimately haven't heard. And I'm telling you, that is so radically different than doing ministry like in the Oklahoma, Texas corridor, because there you're competing with other churches, and it's that idea of what can I do? What area can I specifically hit that reaches people in those areas, because you're like, everybody's scatter shooting and trying to figure out all the formulas. Here,
And you're probably deconstructing. I mean, I'm in Kansas City, right? Bible
mm-hmm,
Belt, and
yep,
there's church. There's a lot of. I love being here, and there's so many great
mm-hmm,
churches and ministries outside of Legacy where I'm at. But
yep,
yeah, like you're weeding through so much just different angles
yep,
of everyone's heard of Jesus, but it doesn't mean
yep,
and some of that's generational. That's one of the reasons I love working with students right now is like, especially our middle school kids, like so many of these kids, even in the Bible Belt, have never heard of Jesus. And
yep.
that's a whole America generation, but that's got to be an amazing opportunity walking into a city where you're like, man, it's just like fertile,
Well,
tilled soil for the gospel.
bro, it's been it. So, okay, let me touch on what you were saying about deconstruction. Okay, so since I'm ancient, right? When I got into student ministry, there was this movement called the emerging church movement, right?
Yep.
Like they kind of went off the deep end late in that movement, but early on, it was this idea of just saying, hey, we can't just do church tradition because we've always done church tradition. And in the first generation of the emerging church didn't throw out the inerrancy of gospel, or like the authority of gospel, right? It didn't throw out the authority of the Bible. And so it was just this idea of going, we have to be willing to shift anything if it will help us follow Jesus better and help people know Jesus,
Yeah.
right? And so that shaped me in a huge way, because as I was coming in, like, it began to help me begin forming this idea of not student ministry as like the future church, or not student ministry as like preparing kids to be good little churchgoers. It was this idea of cross-cultural missions, right?
Yeah.
It was this idea of going, even if I'm close to their age. In my first student ministry, I was only like 4 years older than the seniors, right? But even that, because of the way I was raised, because of where I was raised, I thought differently. I saw the world differently. I saw all those things differently. And so it was this idea of, let's figure out what culture is. Let's realize that we're reaching people that resemble us, but are not us. And so that's how I've looked at student ministry the entire time. Honestly, that's where I've done everything in ministry, right? I was a lead guy for a little while. I was associate guy. I've been an exec guy. Like, you name it. I've probably done it in the church. But it's that idea of, we need to look at, if it's church people looking at people that are outside the church, looking at it like it's cross-cultural, because our set of values and how we do things is different than the set of values of people that were not raised and look at things in the same worldview that we do. And so, like that idea of deconstruction, I think a lot of times, and between you and me, Ryan, we're not going to tell anybody this, I don't really like hanging out with student pastors, because the truth of the matter is, it's one of those where there's so many that come in and go, we're just going to be relational and we're going to play games. And you know what? We're going to have this amazing show and it's going to be super fun. And I'm going, yeah. And when they walk away, they have this great experience, but are they looking at the world going, we have people that are going to hell. We have friends and neighbors who have no idea that they can live a life that they were created for. Right. And so this whole idea of cross-cultural missions for me has always added a level of urgency and just maybe a little bit of passion. You can tell I get fired up about stuff. So being out here in Tucson, so I come on the scene and we're running 40 kids, and I'm like, even at 1,500, we should be double or triple that number. Right. Like a healthy student ministry.
There are so many kids even just barely popping in on Sunday that just don't have a place to land. What are we doing?
100%. And it was low hanging fruit. It was all that stuff. And so I'm talking to Trevor a little bit about it. He's like, bro, we need to go back to our roots of student ministry. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, are you even listening to me? Now, I'm kind of Trevor's emotional support staff person, right? Like if he even needs to vent, he's going to come give me a hard time. And so he's like, are you not listening to what I'm talking about? And I'm like, Trev, I have no idea the words that just came out of your mouth. And so he and I are going back and forth on it a little bit. He's like, these people have not experienced any type of relational ministry at all. And so when Trevor came in, Glenn Elliott, who was the guy who was before Trevor, did an amazing job of handing it off to Trevor. But he set the stage with systems and processes. And then Trevor came in, and he, like I say, he and I see ministry very similar. He came in with the adults and was zeroed in on saying, we are going to all focus on reaching one person. Right. And so then he led the way in that. And so for me, it was, okay, we're going to attach to that. But then how can, how can me as a 43 at the time, math is hard, 40 something at the time, like really connect with students outside of our context. And so I went to the area student pastors and I was like, what do you guys do to get into schools? What do you guys do to connect with students? And they're like, get into school.
Like,
What are
what are
you
you
talking
talking
about?
about? You're like,
And,
oh, guys. Oh,
and I was like,
guys.
oh, okay. And so like, I just started this thing where and I didn't even start calling it anything at first, but I just started showing up at our kids' games, right? Like buying a ticket, going to games. And then the thing with me is, if I lean in, my personality can be overwhelming. And so for me going to games, like my entire career has been, hey, I just find a spot. And then if kids go by, I just make it a point to shout them out and be like, hey, you doing good? How's it going? I may make a lap or two and just say hi to kids or whatever, but it's not one where I go like sit in the student section or like anything like that. And so that's what we started doing, right? And we started calling it game of the week. And it got to the point where I saw this kid at a volleyball game on Tuesday, right? He was watching his sister play. I saw him at Wednesday night. We call it connect because it's this idea of we want to connect with students, right? Connect them with us, connect them with God, connect them with mission, right? And then I saw him Thursday night because he's older, but he plays in the same basketball club that my son does. And at the volleyball game, I said, "What up, Jack?" And he just kind of gave me a nod. And then I was like, I saw him Thursday. I was like, "Bro, you didn't even like seem surprised that I was at the volleyball game." He goes, "Why would I be surprised? You guys are everywhere." And I was like, "Okay, we're starting to make inroads." That idea of connect, and then our tagline, like the tagline that we say that is like cultural establishment type tagline is whether you've been here one time or you've been here a million times, you're part of the family. That means you have a place to belong and you are a unique part of what God wants to do here. Right. And we initially, I had some pushback from my associate Amy because she's like, family is a hot topic. Like it's a tough word for people. And so we spent time unpacking what family looked like and what it meant to be part of the family of God, right? Not to be cheesy old school church, but like what it meant to be part of a true spiritual family that is working together and moving together and being the body of Christ. Right. And so, just teaching on that and preaching on that and leading through that and soaking our culture in that idea of family and connecting with students outside of Sunday and Wednesday. It probably wasn't even 6 months. And we just saw just kids bringing kids. We had, last year, my first semester, I met this awkward freshman. Her name's Abby, right? Super awkward, like super shy, didn't want to talk to anybody. And she brought a friend, and she brought her up to me, and she goes, "Tell me her name." And I'm like, "Abby, I've never met this girl in my life." And so she started this thing where when she would bring somebody new, she would make me guess their name, right? Abby probably has brought 50 people.
Wow.
And then we had a 1-day conference called One Day, because it was one day. And Abby baptized 7 of her friends.
Oh my gosh.
And it's story like that after story like that after story like that, it's just that idea of saying God has created you to do more than just exist. God's created you for more than, in Abby's case, being a cheerleader. You know, God's created you for more than what you could ever imagine. And we've just seen God take in a run. So I know I went off. You asked a question and then I went off wherever I went. So
I love
zero
it.
me back in, bro.
No, I've been taking notes as you've been talking. One question I wrote down I wanted to kind of come back to. You said you're Enneagram 3.
Yeah.
You're like, I gotta be winning.
All the time.
How do you define to you and your staff, what does winning look like? And I'd love to hear a little bit of your story of how that's maybe evolved for you over the years as a pastor.
Yeah. I think it started out like realizing that, and I'm going to say this, I mean, this is what I do. I just say things and then we go back and verbally process it. Um, Realizing that I didn't really matter. Like what I wanted and what I desired didn't matter. It mattered if my siblings got to bed on time, and it mattered if my siblings had breakfast, and it mattered if my siblings got to school. Right. The only time I mattered was when I was on a basketball court, and that was where I didn't think about anything else. Right. It was just me trying to honestly not just be me. And and at some point it was definitely in high school, but then in college it really hit that it was like, no, like I've got stuff to give to the world, and God's gifted me uniquely, and I have the ability to draw this out of people, and so it just kind of went with this idea of I matter. And so I began to live in going, if I believe that God, Ryan, if I believe that God created you uniquely and that he created you to change your world, then I have to look in the mirror and go, God created me uniquely and created me to change my world. And I think the win piece for me is number one, I don't think this side of heaven, there's an actual win for me, because there will always be somebody else that needs to know Jesus, right? There will always be, like, I just recently have moved into the this gen role, which, though we mock it, I love and not calling it that next gen, which sounds normal. We call it this gen because we want to believe that this generation of students matters. This generation of kids can change the world, right? And that's props to my guy Trevor again, because that's his vision. He's like, I want to make sure that you guys are empowered to be able to get students and kids on mission right now. But I just recently moved into this gen, and so it means that my scope is not just students anymore. It's now kids, right? And so if you go both of those, it means that between 0 to 18, there are about 250,000 individuals in Pima County that don't know Jesus.
Wow.
So if we want to say what's the win, it's 250,000 students and kids that come to know Jesus, right? And it's figuring out how to do that. And I mean, that's what keeps me up at night.
It's amazing.
Again, I got distracted. You asked me a specific question, and I got distracted again. That's what happens when you get old, bro.
No, I think that hit the nail on the head. Just
Mhm.
asking like, what is winning? And I'm listening to you talk, and you just are a bleeding evangelist.
Yeah.
It's just coming out of your skin.
Yeah.
So really, you saying like, man, like the win is mobilizing people to mission
100%.
as much as we possibly can.
And that's what I would say is I'm an Enneagram 3, and I can swing both ways, right? You hear the 4 coming out a little bit, but also like for a long time, like when I was a lead guy, right? Like I took the Enneagram and tested as a 2 because that was the role. They needed somebody who was helping them move forward, right? Like they didn't need me out front, like saying, "Look at me, I need a spotlight, and I'm gonna do huge things." They needed me individually helping them, and so I even tested as a 2. And so I would say I'm a 3, probably primarily with a 2 wing, because for me, I want to win. I want everybody and every single person that I encounter to know that they matter to Jesus, right? And to find out who they uniquely are created to be. But I want other people. The biggest win is if I can utilize other people and mobilize other people to do that, because even though I'm awesome, students think it's hilarious when I say that. But even though I have the ability to reach across a wide spectrum of people, I'm limited, and more people, let's go. More people, the better.
I'd love to get under the hood a little bit with how you guys do that in your context you're in now. Because I love that, just this concept of, we kind of have like a little stage of the disciples pathway, we call it at our church. The last one's like being a legacy builder, right? Really this idea of being a 2 Timothy 2:2, like we're out making disciples who make disciples kind of thing. But actually creating that, I have like a little kind of like framework of kind of like a ministry engagement funnel that, our team kind of sometimes sits with, of like, as we move people down that paradigm know that, our goal is to pump out laborers,
Yep.
to think through how as a ministry, are we leading people down a pathway of catching the vision and actually living out living missionally, not
Yep.
just inviting to a program, but really embodying, like, man, I carry the gospel with me everywhere I go.
Yep.
I'm like a Matthew, 9 laborer, out in the harvest field. So I would love to hear a little bit. What are some of the processes, plans? How do you cast vision around mobilizing your team, your staff, your students, your kids to mission?
Again, it's just keeping you'll have to zero me back in on the discipleship process in a second.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Working Genius at all?
I have a basic understanding, but I don't know if anybody listening to this will. So why don't you unpack it?
So it's these different letters, but the one I'm strong in is G, which is galvanizing. And it's this idea of saying, hey, here's where we're going. And then being able to get people pumped up and move to that goal. And so it's kind of a joke on my team right now that they're like, stop galvanizing us. Like, let us do our job. Stop galvanizing us right now. That's what I'm saying. You're going to have to pull me back to the discipleship process a little bit. For me, it was finding out the stats, right? It was how many people in Pima County don't know Jesus? How roughly 6th to 12th grade is about 10% of a population. And so if 850,000 don't know Jesus in Pima County, then that means there's about 85,000 students that don't know Jesus. And so it was keeping that out front. It was me leading the way in a relational ministry of saying, I'm having these conversations, because when I came in, our volunteers, we call them difference makers, but our difference makers would be standing around talking to each other. Right. Then there's me who's working the room. I'm like, I'm touching base with this person. I'm touching base with this person. I'm touching base with this person. And even my associate, there was a little bit of like, hey, we're letting the students come in and we'll let the students do what they want. And we'll let this. And I'm like, no, we get them 40 hours a week. We better maximize every time that we get them. I mean, you can argue, like, if you get them 40 times a year, roughly, right? That's big. That's like, at best, you get them 40 times a year. And so if we only get to encounter them 40 times a year, then we better make it worth it, and the stats, I haven't seen them recently, but the stat that the only spiritual conversations that students engage in, it's like 80% of students only engage in spiritual conversation at church. Right. And so if we only get them 40 times a year, and this is the only time that the vast majority of them talk about God at all, we better not waste a moment. And so it was that urgency piece of going, this matters, like this right here matters. And it was bleeding that into my staff, bleeding that into my difference makers, and then making sure that I kept that idea of you're part of the family up front. And then every week that we would close, we would have different challenges based on whatever lesson it was, like, hey, encourage 5 people this week, or like, be nice to your parents, or whatever. Don't kick your dog. I don't know. But like the challenge that we always had was, who can you bring with you to be part of what God's doing here? Because we need everybody to reach that 885,000. Right. And so it was keeping it in front and keeping it in front and keeping it in front that started kind of that missional ball rolling. And then, and I already mentioned Abby, right? But it was a few stories like Abby's that, as those got going, the momentum like just began to build and build and build and build. And so it was I mean, without sounding super cheesy, it's connection, simplification, and magnification, right? It's connecting. Find a way to connect, right? It's me being willing on a Wednesday night to spend 5 minutes with Abby, guessing her friend's name, knowing I'm never going to know her friend's name, but spending that 5 minutes. Then, as like, it started with her and her one friend, and then her and her 2 friends come up and bring the 3rd friend. And then it was this group of like 20 girls that's coming up and going, hey, can you guess our friend's name? Right. It was taking time to make that connection. It was, I didn't know I was a fan of cheerleading. Right. But it's going to games where we don't have kids playing, but all of the varsity cheerleaders come to our student ministry. Right. And so I'm like, yay, cheerleaders. Yes. And so it's one of those where it's connection, and then it's simplification. It's saying, like, we early on had somebody want to start a youth choir, right? There's nothing wrong with youth choir, But the fact is, there's so much need for just sheer connection and being involved and empowering our kids to not just come hang out at the church, but to get back involved in their school, to be on the basketball team, to be a cheerleader, to be on the volleyball team, to be on student council, to do whatever it is, but be in the world. On Friday night, be at the football game. Don't come hang out with me. Be at the football game, being an influence, right? And so it was simplification, making sure that since the student ministry had gone through some tough times before I got there, it was keep it simple. Don't allow these other things, right? And it was making sure that we stay. Is this helping? If we do this, is it helping ultimately connect with mission? But can it clearly be lined out that it's connecting with us or it's connecting with God, right? And then the missional piece pretty much always has to be there. And like a bell choir doesn't really do that, right? I mean, okay, and you're probably going to get emails or whatever that's like, no, our bell choir is our biggest evangelistic tool. That's great. Your context is different than mine.
Right.
But simplification and then magnification, magnifying those stories and magnifying the things that really matter, right? Like with us, Trevor doesn't just say our generation matters. Like Trevor preaches in a way, and he's not our worship guy anymore, but he still has a hand in that. Chris Hamlin, he makes sure that the worship sets that we do are ones that aren't aimed at students, but will connect with students, right? The stat of when students leave student ministry of how they get connected with the church is so low, right? It's like only at best, only 3 out of 10 students that leave the student ministry get connected with the church. And that's crazy, right? And I think the stats are higher than that. That it's more like 2 out of 10. And so for us, it was given this culture of just a blank slate of people not knowing. We're gonna get ahead of that stat in the first place because we're not trying to get them to be part of the student ministry. We're trying to help them walk with Jesus for their entire lives, right? And so it's one of those where like talk about magnification. Well, Trevor was like, what would it look like? Or we were having conversations about what that would look like. And my associate and I were like, it would be really cool if we could like have a few rows in the worship service for students. And I'm thinking we have bleachers, we have a lower bowl and then we have bleachers on our sides. And I'm thinking like some rows in the bleachers. And Trevor's like, nah, man,
no. They're going up front.
1,000%, dude. 1,000%.
He's like, I've been up there on a Wednesday or Sunday. He's like, when those kids rush that stage, he's like, why are they not we're doing this on, bring them up front. Our freaking boring adults need this.
Bro, you just hit on something that is so freaking ridiculous, right? Like, he's like, no, it'll be up front. I got nervous because I'm like, not a ton of our kids came on Sundays. And so it was like, oh crap, we're going to have these rows reserved and then nobody's going to show up. And then me who has to win and look good winning, is like,
I'm up here. I will worship alone.
Exactly. And so that's my picture, right? And so we take like 5 rows and it fills. And then a few weeks later, we take 6, 7 rows and it fills. And then we take 8 rows and it fills. And so we're filling this entire lower bowl section with students and their families. And it's mostly students because these are kids whose families don't come. But we invited families so that if they wanted the first time, they could. If they come and they want to bring their families, they have somewhere to sit, right? And our leaders sit in the mix with them. So last year, I was at a college football game in Lubbock, Texas, and I get a text from my associate Amy, and she goes, "You're not going to believe what's happening." And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh crap, students messed up. Like there was probably a brawl and I'm going to lose my job when I get home or whatever. And she sends me this picture and it's exactly what you just described. Our students had come off of camp and all of them got out of their seats in the student section and went down front and had spread out across the front of the auditorium and were just hands up, just worshiping. And, that has helped shape our culture of worship for not just students, but it's shaped our entire culture of worship within Pantano. And every Sunday, our students, right now we're having to figure out how to confirm that there's actually seats available in the student section before they go back to sit down because they save a seat and then they just go stand up front, right? And it is this.
Then they're done. They're like, "Oh, I gotta go to the back. I gotta go to the bleachers. Where do I? I don't have a seat. My seat got taken."
Well, and it's one of those where the problem is because they set something there. Nobody like there's seats like in the middle of the section, right? And so nobody wants to be like, Oh, okay, cool. I'll cross everybody. So it ends up leaving like 15 seats right in the center, and we're like, oh no, this doesn't look good on video. And so it's magnification, bro. It's that idea of I serve on a staff that genuinely says we want to help our students and kids know that they matter.
Yeah.
And so, all right. So discipleship process. Look at me actually going back to it on my own. Way to go, me. And so,
Way to go, Frank.
yes. So we're very on ramp as far as culture and relationship and all of that stuff. Specifically on Wednesday nights, making sure that everybody who walks through the doors feels like they matter. Um, we send them on a Wednesday night. We do large group, we do large group, which consists of worship, announcements, worship, and a message. And then we send them to small groups, which are broken up by grade and gender. And so we don't shy away from speaking hard truths into our teens and our teens, and our students. And so
Our teens.
like, yeah, I'm old.
No, I love that. Just keep going.
Uh,
Just cracking me up. That's all.
and so we do that, but then, and our small group leaders are just incredible, bro. Like we have one guy who just this past summer was with these kids from when they were in sixth grade at camp. Like I normally stand up in the middle of youth group time and really drive home the points of what we're looking at, and then like the things that God kind of shared for me through the message in the night and stuff. And one night, man, I just was like, hey, his name's Chris. I was like, dude, why don't you get up and just tell us about this journey with these guys? And it was just, it was incredible to see somebody who had poured in like 6 7 years with this group of guys, and over the course of that time he still had like 2/3 of the guys that started, and that's
Wow.
considering the kids that have moved in and moved out and all these things. And so our small group leaders do an incredible job of making sure that our students are connected. They're owning it. They are still getting better at showing up at events, but they show up pretty consistently. They show up when they're needed. And then we do a program. I'm going to say it wrong, but it's a discipleship experience called Rooted. And so we send. It's not a discipleship program. It's not a small group. It's a discipleship experience. And so and it's great. I don't mean to mock Rooted, but we send our students through Rooted. And then from there, we have a leadership team that Amy's not my associate anymore. She's actually the student pastor now. But that Amy and Jonathan, he is 29 hours student ministry staff. We just call him Jonathan. And so that they lead this leadership team, and it's one of those where that's kind of our funnel. It's pretty simple. Along the way, again, I would say our bigger funnel is really focusing on connect with us, connect with God, connect with mission, right? And we're seeing like this school year, we saw our students start Bible clubs at 4 different high schools, right? And that's without us pushing that at all. Right.
I was going to ask, is that something that you do some training and development in your student
we
leadership
do
team?
when they
where you're like,
when they
hey,
come to us.
our goal
Yeah.
is for you guys to launch on-campus clubs.
No, our goal is for them to be the hands and feet of Jesus everywhere they are. Right. That's ultimately our goal. Right. And so we had a group of students at one of our high schools come to us last year and go, hey, we're going to start an FCA. And they ended up combining with another club. And so it's just the Bible club on campus. Right. And you got to remember, like there aren't FCAs. Young Life is super young. Young Life is super young, but it's not fully developed out here. Right. There aren't these things on campus. And so they came to us, and as they're beginning the process, like we're giving a little bit of advice, a little bit of guidance. They have a staff person who is kind of helping them understand the logistics of that. we're kind of just like guiding them. But as they're doing that, then we had another girl come and go, "Hey, I want to start a Bible club on my campus." And then we had another guy come and say, "Hey, I'm going to start a Bible club on my campus." And then we had these two freshman girls, right? Freshmen in high school. They're like, "Hey, there's not a Bible club at our school, so we want to start one." And so Amy has been phenomenal at being able to walk alongside them and resource them at every point. So at one of the larger high schools here, just about 3 weeks ago, right? Like our students have taken it and run with it. We give a little bit of advice, like we help with their messages if they ask us to. Like we're not pushing anything. We're just pushing them to be on mission, right? But they play into this worship thing during the day, and the campus probably has about 1,000 students, right? They play in this worship thing, and I'm like, dude, can we bring pizza? Can we bring? And Amy was like, "Hey, can we bring sushi?" And I'm like, "We're not taking sushi. Like, that's not a student ministry
I'm
thing."
not bringing raw fish to a bunch of
Right. And I'm like, the mess of that in and of itself, the mess would be horrible. And
There's
so
rice everywhere.
that's what I was picturing, like it just exploding.
Soy sauce and sashimi. And
they have a worship day, and it ends up with kids being blinded by soy sauce.
Sashimi and the spirit. I can picture
right.
the I can see the
Yes.
flyer.
Bible clubs banned from campus.
School reeks of fish.
the great sushi fiasco of 24.
19 students confirmed with worms, mercury and worm.
It's so
poison.
true. It's so true. So we show up.
You guys did pizza.
Yeah.
Or did you do the sushi?
No, we did not. We did not.
Like, we're not doing that, but we will do pizza.
That's right. And so we show up with like 50 pizzas, right? And dude, and it was in the band room on a campus of 1,000 students. Probably 250 students showed up.
Let's go.
And there were seven people up front leading the worship stuff. 6 of those were from our student ministry.
Oh,
and it was one of those
that's got to be like the proudest moment. You're like, bro. This is it. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you, God. God,
yeah.
This is exactly it.
And when I felt the call to student ministry, way back in 1994, going to be a freshman in high school. Shout out class of 98. Before most people listening to this were born. This is the kind of church that I wanted to be part of, right? You read the beginning of the book of Acts, and you're like, thousands of people come to know Jesus, like all of these things, right? You see baptisms every day, dude. As a student ministry this year, we're going to baptize. We already have baptized almost 200 students.
Praise
right?
God.
The church as a whole is almost at 900 for the year, right? It's one of those where God just keeps opening opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and we're just being faithful to that. And the New Year's Day of 23, January 1, 2023. I have just come back from visiting my family in Dallas. I am off the plane 15 minutes. I get a call that says, "Hey, there was a bonfire last night, and there was an accident, and a kid died." Oh. And immediately, we were in contact with the school, and we were the only church that was asked to be on campus. And it was because we had been going. This is where it comes full circle a little bit. We had been going to games. We had conversations with the administration, not because we scheduled meetings, not because we said, "Hey, let us help you." It was because we just showed up. And so it turned out it was one of our students was involved. He didn't die, but one of our students was involved in the accident. And so we were able to walk with him through that. We were on campus praying with students as they're just bawling their faces off, right? Okay, that situation in and of itself is tough. 3 weeks later, Trevor is driving to work, and he comes up on an accident and holds the hand of another student as she passes away. Again, different high school. The only church that was actually invited to be on campus was us. And it was because we've been showing up. It's because, it was because Trevor's daughter goes to that high school. So he had been on campus. It was because Trevor was willing to get out of his car and hold this girl's hand as she passed away. Right? Like, it is us getting out of the freaking way and walking through the doors that God opens for us. It is us realizing that this is a community of 1 million people where 85% of them, if they died tonight, would not go to heaven because they don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it is us saying it is worth fighting for every soul that God puts in front of us. And I get it. We're just called to be faithful. It's the Holy Spirit that does the life change, right? It's the Holy Spirit that calls people to God. It's the Holy Spirit. But I'll tell you, I will not lay down tonight not feeling like I'm doing everything I possibly can to help every person that I encounter know Jesus. And that's where Trevor is a very strong 8 on the Enneagram, but he and I see ministry very similar. And it's been a blessing to be able to be in a church where it's saying, we're going to do whatever we can to reach as many people for Jesus in the fastest way possible. And God's honoring that. And so,
yeah, praise God.
I don't know, bro.
Like it's amazing. I'm super inspired hearing your story and just
Thanks.
hearing stories of what God's doing in your life and in your ministry and in your team.
Yeah.
Man, like that's what every pastor longs for, is to be a part of a move of God like that. And so thank you for sharing. That's going to be a huge encouragement to everybody listening to this. And I'm inspired, and I just wrote down on my notepad, show up.
Yeah.
Circled it, get out of your office and just go show up.
Yeah. That's been honestly, Ryan, that's been, I keep calling her my associate. She's not. She's my student pastor, right? This is her first job out of college, and she was raised in outside Chicago. She was so very strong Midwest ties, very church culture that she came out of, and so it's been one of those where she had to see me doing it before she started getting it, right? She had to see. Okay, this is how we connect. This is how we actually change the face of Pima County, right? This is how we change our high schools. This is it, by just showing up. And I'll tell you this, she is not somebody who you would go, she's going to go sleep in a tent on a mission trip, but she's leaving tomorrow morning to go sleep in a tent on a mission trip, because it's not a student trip. It's an all church trip, but we have a contingent of students going. And so she wants to be there. I didn't make her. She wants to be there so that she can connect with those students, right? And it's been crazy to see what happens when we show up with Pantano. Trevor found the perfect job for him because dude loves golf, right? And so he's probably playing golf 2 times a week, but he's not playing golf. He's at these country clubs showing up and having conversations, and these people are coming to know Jesus, right? It's yesterday, when in the middle of the day, I went to get my haircut, right? And shout out to my guy, Jay. But I went to get my haircut because Jay's my one. And when I knew where we were going to move, I found a barber and started going to him and going to him and going to him. And Trevor will say that he's the one that went to him first. He was not. I was, just so we're clear.
Yeah, take that, Trevor.
Yeah, you're probably never going to listen to this, but it's fine, buddy.
We'll send it to him.
Yeah.
I'll send it. Well, you send him the link. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it, like, that guy has started coming to church. And yesterday, as I'm sitting in the barber chair, he's like, so I think I want to be baptized. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. And he's like, and I've been talking to my daughter, and I think she wants to be baptized. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do that. And so we're working on time frame, but it's that idea of, even though I'm paying him to be there, right? But it's that idea of showing up in his chair consistently, right? And so I don't know, bro. It's just being faithful, and it's being willing to be uncomfortable, to say, like tonight, right? It's fall break here. One of the football teams in town, they're still playing, and the starting quarterback is one of my guys, right? He's one of, like, even with me transitioning out of full-time student ministry into like the more this gen role, right? Like I'm still connected to those older guys. And so, like he was like, hey, I'm probably going to play really well tonight. Any chance you can make it? Well, tonight, like we just went to Spire this week, right? And before that, my wife was on a girls trip. And so it's been like a pretty, like not stressful, but it's been like a real busy couple of weeks. And we're going to show up at the game tonight. Now we may only stay till halftime, but we're going to show up to the game and I'm going to make sure that I can identify a few plays that he did well on and shout him out. So, and
then you can take your wife on a killer date after or something.
100%, 100%.
Frank, if you want to play, can you play a game with me? Not a game. I just want to. I think I want to get really practical. If you, and I know we didn't prep this, but you said those three things: the connect, simplify, magnify.
Yeah.
And with our last few minutes together here, I would love to see if you can on the spot. You seem like a good on the spot, kind of on your feet kind of guy. I would love to give maybe 3 really practical things for everyone listening. Hey, because I mean, some of this is for me. I'm like, I love that. Yeah. 3 practical things for youth pastors listening on how to connect. 3 practical things on how to simplify and then how to magnify.
So on the big thing that popped into my head as you were talking was for connection is to realize that there is something unique and special about every person, right? And it's a matter of being able to look at every person and go, you may really frustrate me, but God created you in some way unique and not just in your ability to annoy me. God created you unique in some way and looking for what that is, whether that's their interests, whether that's their background, whether that's the way they dress, and then really zeroing in on that and showing interest in it. Because and not fake, right? For me, anytime I meet somebody, it is pulling back a picture of how did my God, my Heavenly Father, like how did he create? I know how he created me uniquely, right? But how did he do that for you? And so every person that I meet helps me understand him a little more. But I would say every person that I encounter, it's going, what's unique about you, right? And maybe you call them weird, right? What's weird about you? But it's that idea of being like refocusing and going, what is it about this person that makes them unique? And when I'm able to do that, it helps me really be able to make that connection and them feel very valued and honestly open to me being able to point them to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. In just that small window.
We do with our team. I say, get interested. And if you're not interested, then get curious.
Yep.
And just wiring in like, hey, curiosity, breeds connection.
Yeah.
Because when you're curious about someone, you ask questions. And I'm like, guys, these students are like 2 or 3 questions away from you having a life-changing conversation.
100%.
Every single one of them.
100%. Well, it's that connection piece is catalyst for everything, right? Early on, not early on, but a few years ago, like I got questions about shouldn't you say connect with God, connect with us, connect with mission? And I'm like, unless they feel a connection with us, unless we can be like the hands and feet of Jesus, unless we can be God with skin on, I know all those are cheesy things, but like unless we can be that person, right? They're not going to care about a God that they can't see and a God who is more powerful and has a plan for them, but they're not going to care unless they can actually see it displayed for them. And when they can do that, then it becomes so much easier to point them to Jesus.
And that's the life of Christ. I'm going through Mark right now with my junior, senior guys. I'm one of the co-leaders. I always try to still be with a small group.
I love that.
I'm at a campus level, so I'm never not leading a group of students. And I'm like, guys, we're just reading through Mark every day. It's like Jesus connected with a real life problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then he forgave them their sin.
Yep.
And then he mobilized them on mission.
Yep.
Every time he just sees people. So I just love that because it's not our model, it's Christ's model.
Yep.
Like Jesus showed exactly what you're talking about. Like those 3 things is like the life of Christ. Like it's the master's plan of evangelism, like that old book that Robert, that Coleman book's amazing, but it's really that. It's just like be with people, see them in their need, share the gospel, mobilize them on mission.
I love that, bro. The connection, I would go back, we've talked about it a lot, but I would say for the connection piece, show up.
Show
you
up.
know, show up. And even if it's a little inconvenient sometimes, I'm not saying sacrifice your family. I'm not saying sacrifice your own like rhythms and self-care, but I'm saying prioritize showing up. Because even if you're awkward, even if you're weird, right? I have an amazing, I'm not going to say his name, but I have an amazing difference maker. Very awkward, but he consistently shows up for his guys.
Yeah.
And is changing their lives.
I know.
I have another small group leader, but it's just another guy who me is like, oh, that guy's not cool. But I'll tell you this, he's changing the lives of our students.
Yeah.
And because he shows up. And then third on the connection piece, man, let's go spiritual a little bit. I would say make sure you're connecting with God. Because to be able to look at people uniquely, you need to remember who you are to Jesus. To have the willingness to show up, you got to remember who you are to Jesus. And so I would say a connection piece, make sure you are connecting with God, right? And I mean, you could do all the other things, like look at the calendar and plan different things and be strategic with that stuff. But I'll talk about that in simplification. But connect with God, and then on the simplification stuff, man, I can't think of the guy who wrote it, but the book Simple Church. Our staff has just jumped into that book like crazy. And I'd read it a long time ago because the church where I preached at in Oklahoma was a small church, but it was like there were 8 billion programs, and I'm like, come on, guys, let's focus here. And
Yeah, we don't
so
want to be Golden Corral. Let's get that out of here.
100%. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Dude, I grew up thinking Golden Corral
that,
was the greatest thing ever. And
no,
we
then
went
you grow
there.
up, then you're like, that it sucks.
It was not good.
That's a Chris Hodges deal. He's like, do we want to be Roost Chris or Golden Corral? You take your pick, guys, but I think
Yes.
I know which one I want to go to.
Exactly. And so for us, it is, we have simplified to the connection piece, right? There is, in revamping our kids ministry right now, we needed to change some programming. And the question I asked is, how does this help us connect with students? Like in the level of excellence that it's at, in how it's being staffed, how is it connecting with students, right? And it's caused us to have to shift some stuff around with that. But the connection piece was the simplification piece. And then when you dive into that, it's connect with us, connect with God, connect with mission, right? But it's that connection piece of going, what is it that we are going to do better than anyone else, right? What is it? How am I as a 3 going to win? Well, I'm going to win if I can make sure that the vast majority of students and kids in our ministry are connected with, right? Because if they're connected, then they're going to be on mission, right? And so I would say under simplification, find that thing that you can do with excellence, that your heart beats for, that you are passionate about, and that you can do with excellence. Because if you can find that thing and then build out from there, then it will be a natural outflow of who you are. And then stay in that spot, right? Don't get pulled off of it. Doing all the other things. And then under simplification, you're going to have to say no to good things. You're going to have to say no to good things. The story of King David, his anointing, right? Like God told Samuel to say no to all of his brothers who were more muscled up and more handsome and more all these things for David to be anointed king, right? For you to stay simple and to stay on mission and to stay focused and zeroed in, you're going to have to say no to good things. And again, that's where staying plugged into the mission that God has you on and figuring out where your heartbeat is and who you are is going to help guide that. And then third thing under simplification, I don't know. I'm trying to keep it simple. I just gave you 2 things. That's pretty simple, right? No.
We can keep it there if you want.
No, I would say the biggest, and again, I'm a verbal processor, so I'm just going to throw it out there and then I can zero it in if you want. I would say the third thing under simplification would be okay with not doing everything, because like they're especially in Dallas, right? I was at a church in Flower Mound, which is a suburb of Dallas, and like not far from us was Fellowship Church, right, which is giant, and then there was the Village, which is giant, and there's all these other churches. And for us to be successful, I had to be okay internally with not trying to do the things that they could do, right? And so to keep it simple is to be okay with not being able to do everything, and some of those overlap. Those simplification things overlap. Um, Magnification, um, it would tie in with all those other things of going, hey, what are those core things? Connection, and for us, simplification, and it would be magnifying those things, because magnifying, what you magnify is what you're going to be known for, right? It's going to be whether it's what you want to stand for or what you want to look like. What you magnify is going to be the truth, is going to be the perception, and a lot of times, unfortunately, perception is truth, right? And so, um, on magnification, I would say be selective. Be selective about what you want to magnify, and make sure it lines up with what you really want to accomplish. Um, I would say the second thing under magnification would be, don't just magnify things in one way, right? Do it in, like different social media posts, whether it's just a standalone, like words from a sermon, or it's a video, or it's a testimony or a story of somebody doing something that you want to magnify, but magnify in a variety of ways so that it'll hit people in different ways, right? Um, and then on and then magnification, the last thing, man, I'd probably just say, um, be unashamed to magnify what you're going to magnify. Like, go at it, go for it, because stand on what you're going to stand for, and figure out who it is you're uniquely wired to be, figure out how you want to do it and what God's calling you to, and then just run. And that's the thing you magnify. Like, you just go after it and just let people unashamed know, this is who I am and this is what we're doing. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that with Pantano. We're unashamed that we keep coming back to, hey, who's your one? Right? It's the student ministry going, hey, we're unashamed to say we are creating a ministry where everybody has a place. No matter where they're at on their journey with Jesus, everybody has a place, and they're an important part of what God's doing. And so whatever it is whatever you're going to stand on, whatever your goal is in your heart and all those things, just magnify that everywhere you go. So there you go, man. I pulled it out. Way to go, me.
Dude, that was gold. I know we're out of time, but I got a lot of questions. So if you're down, we might have to, if you're down, and maybe come do a part 2. I'd love
Bro,
to
I'm good.
I'd love to get into a little bit of team, how you do training. I
Heck
got
yeah.
all sorts of other questions.
Yeah, bro. Well, and I would just
This
say,
was awesome.
anybody listening, like, our team right now, the other thing on magnification is, I am blessed with Trevor DeVage. Nobody tell him I said that, but I am blessed with Trevor DeVage, because that man will stand in the gap for students and kids, right? And so, if you are and this is the first, no insult to all the guys I've worked for before this, if you're in a church where you don't have somebody like that, like, reach out to us, because, whether Trevor gets in touch with your lead guy or gives you tips on how to handle that and figure that out,
Hmm.
like, we're passionate about making sure that happens. But the other thing is, if you're looking at your church and you're like, man, I really want to do stuff, guys, right now we have, and let me just be very clear. I'm like the lowest, like, on this level that I'm about to say. We are blessed with some amazing rock stars. Trevor is a freaking top-notch leader, knows how to mobilize an organization. We have Chris Hamlin, who is now one of our executive pastors, but has built the worship program from the ground up, understands production, understands on, and and understand scalability. Right, Trevor, the same way. Leadership at smaller organizations versus larger organizations. We have Saul, who, if you are dealing in a multicultural context, dude is established in bilingual ministry like crazy. The understanding of how to get into multicultural stuff, and then you've got me, who I don't know that I'm good, but I've just been around for a long time, right? And so talking about reaching this gen and connection and all that stuff. And if you're listening and you can't afford a consultant, you can't afford that stuff, reach out to us, because that's where our heart's at. Like, that's where we're saying, you know what, we want every person in existence to know Jesus loves them. And so how do we do that? It means helping every church we possibly can. I mean, we've had 3 churches come in and hang out with us over the last month. So put that out there. Kind of a shameless plug, but not really, because it's like, let us help you for free. So there you go.
Frank, thank you. How can people get in contact with you? Best way is Instagram, email.
Yep.
Carrier pigeon.
Yeah, well, that's about where I'm at.
I have a Falcon. I just send notes to people. It's like Game of Thrones. I get my Raven. I send them out to take notes.
But does your Raven have 3 eyes? Because if not, then I don't know. Hey, Insta. I'm still on Facebook.
I'm still there.
X or Twitter. I get a lot of notifications from them, so I don't check that much, because it seems like I get less notifications when I don't check Twitter.
X is a wild. It's a bottomless pit.
It's
a wild place.
From a sports perspective, I love it. From everything else, I'm like, oof. Email fnichols@pantano.church. Man, we respond. Our entire team responds, and we definitely have to do a part 2, because we're about to open this campus just down the road from us. And so I just need to know, with me being kind of the central position for all of that, like what that's going to look like. Like we're talking about all the regular, like the constants and all that stuff. So we definitely got to do a part 2.
Oh yeah, have fun with multi-site. It's a game and a half. I'll tell you that.
So, well, I mean, hey, I've got to win anyway, so I got to figure out the rules.
Heck yeah. Frank, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Heck yeah.
This is a great blessing to me. And I know this is going to be a blessing to a lot of people listening to it. So thanks.
All right, my brother. Let me know what else I can do for you, and anybody listening, reach out.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode. If it was a blessing to you, my ask is that you would share this content with a friend, someone else in leadership and in ministry. I hope it was a blessing to you, and I hope that God blesses your ministry moving forward.